today we're going to talk about loss and trauma, and that is something that happens obviously to the adopted child and could have happened to you as well before you went on the process of adoption. And healing from loss and trauma is so important for both parties, for the adoption to go smoothly in a way. So you may have come to adoption because you've had a significant disappointment. So you may have had the situation where you're not able to have children, you may have lost a child, or it might not be. You might have biological children and you just want to adopt. But there probably will be in your life at some point some loss or trauma. And if you look way back on my channel, you'll see that my childhood was very, very difficult. And so I've had to have a process of grieving and getting through that process. And that's taken me many years. Importantly, really, I think before you come to adoption, it's good to sit down and think about any things that may or present problems. So if you have had a period of mental health that's been significant, you've had a loss that's been significant, but it may not be recent, but maybe you've lost a close member of the family, or there's something that's really broken your heart, shall we say, in your life, then it's good to acknowledge it. Try to start healing before you come to the adoption process, because it will rake those things up for you, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing to face those fears. It's a good thing. But if you can start to do that before you enter the process, then that is going to be a lot easier for you. The way that I have always managed to overcome some of these things is I've thought about writing those things down for myself, reflecting on why they hurt me so much. I can't always share with people. I'm not very good at sharing with many people, and up until I was about 30 I didn't actually cry very much, and that's because of my history. And so I've learnt to think about things and try to absorb what it is that's hurting me, what it is that's causing those inner sad feelings. And the way that I do that sometimes is just to write it down, and when I feel that I want to let it go, then I'll rip that piece of paper up or throw that piece of paper in the bin. But it might be that I have to share it with someone. So generally it's my husband, but I might need to share that thought with someone so that I can actually get it out in the open and say it. Now, luckily for me, I'd done a lot of that before I came to adoption, but when we were going through the process, they went through my childhood, and I knew that was going to be difficult because I'd processed it a few years before, but I didn't really want to talk about it out loud. Nobody does when something's really painful, do they? And there is no way that an adopter needs to be refused just because they've been through a lot of loss and trauma. In fact, if you have been and you've managed to heal or process it, then you're in a great place to be an adopter. You're in the best place. But you need to understand that when children come, they might reopen that. So, for example, if a child comes from domestic violence, or there's drugs and alcohol, they're coming from that, and they're coming into my world, that could reopen, and it could cause me to be traumatized. And so I've got to be strong enough to know that when it comes at me, I'm going to be able to take it, because some of the histories are horrendous. And it may be that you don't get one of those histories. It may be that you get a very young child that doesn't have much of a history there, and it's quite a simple, straightforward adoption, and that's brilliant if that's the case. But often the children will come with significant abuse past and histories, and so it's important for you to recognize what might be the triggers in you, even if you've processed that trauma and loss, that will then be reopened and triggered when the child comes to you. And that might not happen to start with. It may be 3 months down the line as suddenly you feel this overwhelming sense of grief and sadness, and it's because you've been empathetic with your adopted child, you've put yourself in their shoes, and you thought you'd recovered from your own trauma and loss, but actually it still begins to rear its ugly head again. So just be aware that that can happen. When you're aware of these things, you'll know when it's happening anyway. This is what is termed a secondary trauma as well, which I've done a video on, when you are being traumatized through the child's trauma. But of course, if you've got your past traumas, that's a double whammy. It doesn't negate you from being an adopter, but it does mean that you have to have an awareness of it and start dealing with the issues before you come to adoption. If that helps you, then I hope it does. There's a playlist on my channel about adopter wellbeing that might be a good one to look at next. And please subscribe. Thank you.